I have better chemistry with her. That's why I'm divorcing you.
Sorry, Hallie. Oh, and feel free to sue for alimony in the divorce. This guy will pay for everything for you.
Kent, who thrusts the divorce papers at me, says with a flippant laugh. Standing next to him is his mistress, Regina, with a triumphant grin on her face. I thought he'd been coming home suspiciously late recently, but I never imagined he was having an affair. And these two had the audacity to confess their adultery right in front of our daughter. They clearly don't give a damn about how a child would feel seeing her own father's infidelity and his intimate behavior with his mistress. I couldn't care less about divorcing him. But if they dare to hurt my precious daughter, I won't show any mercy. I take a small breath and vow in my heart to give these two a taste of hell. My name is Hallie Ingram, a typical 40-year-old working mother. Kent and I had an office romance, and this year marks our 12th wedding anniversary. I'm just a regular employee in the accounting department, but Kent is a manager in the company's core planning division, with a respectable position and income. Our daughter Hilda, who just turned 9, is a very smart, thoughtful, and wonderful child, unlike me. She's very attached to me and incredibly cute. Recently, she's even started helping out with household chores. But on the flip side, she doesn't seem to like her dad very much. Because he is uncooperative with housework and childcare, and criticizes every single thing I do. Hilda, who grew up with a father like him, has hardly spoken to him lately. But I had a reason why I could never bring myself to take Kent's side. It goes back to when Hilda was 5 years old. Hilda had wet the bed one time. I'm sorry. Hilda, who had recently outgrown bedwetting and become a big girl. She was blushing and on the verge of tears from the sheer embarrassment.
It's okay, don't worry about it.
I try to cheer up the dejected Hilda. But instead of washing the sheets or comforting Hilda, Kent scowled and spat out.
Ew, that's disgusting. What the hell are you doing?
Hilda's face held a look of despair at her father's treatment. Of course, I immediately scolded him and made him apologize to Hilda. But she still remembers that incident and it seems she can't forgive him even now. His apology was just for show, and he kept grumbling complaints under his breath afterward, so I don't think he understands just how awful he was to his daughter. Hilda noticed that too, and since then, she's hardly tried to interact with him. In the first place, Kent only doted on Hilda when it was convenient for him. When he was in a foul mood, he would even take it out on Hilda when she came running up to him with a smile. It's entirely his own fault, but he's convinced it's because I turned Hilda against him.
It's your fault Hilda hates me. Do you enjoy excluding me that much?
He would frequently shout at me like this when he was in a bad temper. We've only been married 12 years, but I'm not confident I can stay with this man going forward. Every time the word divorce crossed my mind, I would secretly sigh. One day in early February, when the cold reached its peak.
All right, let's work hard on making these. Mommy will help out.
Hilda had been in the kitchen since morning to make Valentine's Day chocolates. Apparently, kids these days don't give chocolates to boys they like, but exchange them with their close friends. It's so different from the Valentine's Day I know. As I was thinking that, Hilda took out a distinctly wrapped package, looking a bit embarrassed. It's for a boy in my class. Seeing Hilda blush and act all shy, I couldn't help but smile.
I see. Then let's make the chocolates in this wrapping a little extra special. Yeah.
I wanted to hear more details, but I knew Hilda would get upset if I pried too much. So I suppressed my burning curiosity and devoted myself to helping her out. After that, the chocolate making was a success. Since she would give them out tomorrow, we put them all together in the fridge. But the next morning,
the chocolates are gone. Why?
Hilda, who had opened the fridge with a cheery look, let out a cry of despair.
Why?
There were only a few chocolates left in the fridge. Then Kent, who had woken up sluggishly, came over and spoke to me in a mocking tone. "Oh, I ate the chocolates in the fridge yesterday." "Handmade chocolates for Valentine's Day? How old are you?" "I wanted some high-end stuff they sell at department stores." "And man, you suck not just at cooking but at making sweets too." Apparently, he had mistakenly thought I made them and ate up the chocolates in the fridge. He kept saying they tasted bad, so I wondered how he could eat almost all of them, but that's beside the point right now. Those chocolates were made by Hilda. She was going to take them to school today and hand them out to everyone.
What?
Kent suddenly got flustered and started making excuses that it wasn't his fault.
It's your fault for leaving them in a place like that. It's like saying it's okay to eat them. It's not my fault.
Hearing that, Hilda yelled at him as big tears streamed down her face.
Of course it's wrong to eat them without permission. Enough, I hate you.
Later, he tried to appease her by offering to buy her whatever she wanted. But she ignored him, wrapped up the remaining chocolates, and took them to school.
This is your fault. Why is it my fault? Hilda cried that much because you didn't follow up properly.
I held my head in my hands at his incredibly misplaced lashing out. Hilda was feeling down for a while about the Valentine's incident, but when my parents came to visit on the weekend, her mood instantly recovered.
Grandpa, Grandma, let's play together.
Seeing Hilda in high spirits, my parents were also beaming with smiles. Especially Grandpa, he was grinning so much it looked like his face might melt off. She really is such a good kid. My parents dote on her a lot, so she's very attached to them. By the way, Kent's parents live far away and are quite difficult people, so Hilda seems to find it hard to get close to them. Around 10 a.m., when the living room clock struck the hour, Kent came shuffling into the living room in his pajamas.
Shut up. It's the weekend, so let me sleep in.
Oh, my bad.
Harlot?
Kent, who had entered with his usual manner, made a surprised face upon seeing my parents in the living room. Grandpa is strict about manners and etiquette, so he feels uncomfortable around him.
Are you busy with work? I'm sorry for barging in at a time like this.
When Grandpa said that apologetically, he shook his head vigorously from side to side. Then, he called me outside the living room.
If your parents were coming, you should have told me beforehand. It's embarrassing to be seen in such a slovenly state. But I worked overtime until late last night and I'm sleepy.
He scolded me in a voice low enough that my parents couldn't hear. By the way, I had properly informed him in advance that my parents were coming. It's his own fault for forgetting that and lazing around in bed until this hour. I sympathize with him working overtime late, but come to think of it, he's been coming home late a lot recently. It's a different department, but I hadn't heard anything about the planning division being busy. I wondered if some trouble had occurred with work, but he was angry so I couldn't ask him anything more. Even after changing and tidying up his appearance, he remained in a foul mood.
It's about lunchtime. Shall we go out to eat? Yay!
After having a pleasant time with everyone except the sole grumpy Kent, Grandpa suggested going out for lunch. Oh. I have to go out now, actually.
You do?
Yes, I do. When I asked back in surprise since I hadn't heard about him going out, Kent replied, unable to hide his irritation. After that, we enjoyed a fun lunchtime without him.
See you later then, Hilda. Yeah, see you.
After seeing off my parents, who were heading straight home, at the bus stop, Hilda and I made our way back. Upon returning home, Kent was standing there with an annoyed look on his face, even though he was supposed to have gone out.
Huh? I thought you went out?
Then, he exploded with rage and shouted at me.
Do you still prioritize your own parents even after getting married? Normally you're supposed to put your husband first, aren't you? Huh, what's this all of a sudden? Do you have no awareness as a wife?
Ignoring my words, Kent kept yelling. Judging from the way he spoke, apparently he was upset about being left out. Then you should have just come to lunch with us.
I don't want to eat while having to worry about your parents on my precious day off.
I suppressed the urge to feel dismayed, thinking what the heck is that? By the way, right after Hilda was born, during a challenging Christmas season, I was half-forced to visit Kent's family home. It was a hectic time preparing for Christmas, so while taking care of Hilda, I also helped out at my in-laws and had to spend the time until New Year's carefully avoiding offending my moody in-laws. Compared to that, this is nothing, but for Kent it seems to be something rage-inducing. Sigh. Seeing him ranting angrily, Hilda let out a small sigh. She had been smiling merrily until a little while ago, but her gaze toward Kent had completely cooled. Then one day. That day, Kent unusually went out early in the morning, so Hilda and I were relaxing at home.
What should we have for lunch?
Since it was just me and Hilda, I opened the fridge thinking we could do something simple. Then I heard the front door open and a voice saying I'm home.
Huh? He said he wouldn't be back until evening though.
I tilted my head and went to the entryway, but it wasn't just Kent standing there. Hi there, you're Hallie from accounting, right? I'm Regina Nolan, the receptionist.
Huh?
Standing next to Kent with an unbelievable smile on her face was Regina, who had just joined our company recently. I heard she's incredibly cute and has several male employees going after her. Why was she at our house on the weekend?
Let's not stand around talking. Why don't we go to the living room?
Surprised, but guiding Regina to the living room. Hilda also seemed startled by the sudden visitor. And as soon as the two sat down on the sofa, they dropped a bombshell. So, I'm remarrying this person.
What?
The two looked at me with disdainful eyes as I let out an absent-minded voice. Then they continued with smirks on their faces.
I have better chemistry with her.
That's why I'm divorcing you.
Sorry, Hallie. Oh, and feel free to sue for alimony in the divorce. My guy will pay for everything for you.
Saying my guy, Regina intertwined her arm with him. Seeing the couple getting intimate, the cool-headed part of my brain understood. Ah, an affair.
I was planning to tell you another day, but she insisted on getting married by Christmas, so I thought I'd let you know early.
I brought this too. Kent thrust divorce papers that had already been filled out at me as I remained in a daze.
I've been dissatisfied with our married life for a while now. I mean, I'm the ace of the super important planning department, you know? It's a mismatch for a guy like me to be married to a boring accounting hag like you. A young, cute girl like her suits me better.
Regina looked at me with a triumphant smile at Kent's words. I had been in a daze, but I snapped out of it at Kent's next words.
Oh, I'll give you custody. Hilda doesn't get attached to me, and she's not cute at all lately, just like you.
Wah! Kent said something outrageous in a voice loud enough for Hilda in the living room to hear. I hurriedly looked at Hilda, and while she didn't seem to understand the situation, she appeared to have understood his words. Hilda was looking at us with a devastated expression. The moment I saw her face, rage surged up inside me all at once. I swiftly picked up the divorce papers, quickly filled them out and showed him.
This should do, right? I'll go submit it to the municipal office now.
And I took Hilda by the hand to her room, swiftly packing necessary clothes and such for an overnight stay. Then I quickly packed my own things too. I couldn't leave Hilda in this house with such awful people any longer. For now, I got my muddled head together enough to pack the bare essentials and go to my parents' house. As we hurriedly left, the two saw us off with nasty smirks until the very end. The next day, I let Hilda stay home from school with my parents and went to submit my resignation to the company. Just the thought of working in the same place as those two made me nauseous.
Thank you for everything.
The accounting department was in an uproar over the sudden resignation. I was indebted to the people in accounting, so I discreetly explained the situation and asked them to keep it a secret from the other employees. The accounting staff who heard the story went pale and were shaking for some reason, saying how could they? After submitting my resignation, I left work early and headed to the house I lived in with Kent, along with my parents and Hilda. Everyone worked together to move our belongings to my parents' house. There wasn't that much stuff, so we finished packing in a few hours. I wonder if Kent will be shocked to see the empty house when he gets back.
Well, not that I really care.
And we left the house we had lived in for many years. 1 week later, I was still working at the same company as Kent. I wanted to quit immediately if possible, but I had to hand over my work and finish remaining tasks. The earliest I could resign was a month later. I tried my best to avoid running into Kent and Regina and continued working quietly. But that afternoon, the accounting department head told me the president was calling for me. I tilted my head, wondering what it could be about as I headed to the president's office.
Excuse me.
I knocked and opened the door to the president's office. There I found the president looking furious, Kent with a pale face. And for some reason, my dad was there.
Dad? What are you doing here?
But before he could answer my question, Kent shouted at me in a tearful voice.
Why didn't you tell me your dad is a major shareholder in our company and the president's best friend?
Oh, did I not mention that? That's right. My dad has been friends with our company president since they were kids, and they consider each other their closest friends. Dad bought a large amount of shares to support the president when he started the company. And he's still a major shareholder in our company now. He owns some land in this area, and he manages that land to earn a bit of money. He was a regular salaryman until he retired, but thanks to that, our family is quite well off. That's the background to how he can be a major shareholder in the company. When I graduated from college and was looking for a job, there was a major recession going on, and I was having trouble finding employment. When I consulted my dad about it, he introduced me to this company. That's a good company. They should be able to overcome this recession too. Trusting his words, I got a job at this company. I did take the employment exam, but it was practically thanks to Dad's connections that I was able to join. So after joining the company, I made this request to the president.
Just because I'm his daughter, you don't need to give me special treatment. As long as I can get a reasonable salary, that's enough. I have no interest in promotions either. I'd just be grateful to have a place in a corner of this company.
The president, understanding my feelings, treated me as just another employee while I was working. By the way, only a very small number of employees know about my connection to the president. The accounting department staff know, but I wonder if they turned pale when I submitted my resignation because they were worried it would somehow impact the company, since I, who have ties to the president, was resigning for an outrageous reason. I don't have that much influence myself though. Incidentally, the reason I never told Kent about this was because I thought his attitude might change if he found out I was the daughter of a shareholder. Early in our relationship, I was afraid his attitude would change, so I couldn't tell him about it. And so I ended up never mentioning it, and here we are. Well, it's not like there were any issues from not telling him all this time, and I figured there wouldn't be any problems going forward either. Or rather, I had completely forgotten about it. My dad is a major shareholder, but he doesn't interfere with the management of the company. He doesn't even attend shareholder meetings, so he has a surprisingly low profile for a major shareholder.
And that's the situation.
After I explained the whole story, Kent's face turned from blue to white. Seeing Kent like that, Dad let out a huge sigh.
I had no intention of interfering in your affairs at all. If you two had an amicable divorce, I probably wouldn't have even contacted Scott, your president.
As he said Scott, my dad looked at the president, his best friend and one of his own.
However, you hurt my precious daughter. I absolutely cannot forgive that, so I decided to make a big deal out of it and get this guy involved.
The president gave a small nod at Dad's words and replied,
It's not that I don't trust my best friend's word, but it was just such an unbelievable thing from a common sense standpoint. I mean, who would have thought an employee in an office romance would cheat with someone over a decade younger than him? It's unthinkable with any common sense. So we conducted an internal investigation, and unfortunately, it was confirmed that your affair was real.
The president sighed in exasperation as he said that. His eyes looking at Kent contained a hint of contempt. My dad was also glaring at Kent with cold eyes.
It would be unfair for this idiot not to face any punishment.
Indeed it would. The two best friends nodded in perfect unison. And then the president declared to Kent,
You're fired, Mr. Ingram.
At this, Kent made a shocked face and immediately retorted,
Wait a minute. Why am I being fired? Because I had an affair and disrupted workplace discipline? If you fire me for a reason like that, it will make your company look bad.
A reason like that, those aren't words he has any right to say. Besides, I feel like keeping an employee who cheated on his wife and child with a much younger woman would be worse for the company's image. Retorts toward Kent were popping into my head one after another, but before I could open my mouth, the president replied with a big sigh.
There's one more thing that came to light as we proceeded with the internal investigation. Mr. Ingram, you embezzled company funds, didn't you?
This was news to both me and my dad, and we both widened our eyes in surprise. The president's face held exasperation mixed with anger, while Kent was breaking out in a cold sweat all over at the sudden accusation.
Oh, and just so you know, you can't talk your way out of this. I have solid evidence in my possession. Why did you embezzle funds? Could it be that you used company money to play around with your mistress?
Kent was at a loss for words at the president's pointed question. He had probably hit the nail on the head. Come to think of it, Regina, who came to our house the other day, was decked out in brand-name items from head to toe. I had felt it was odd that she, who had just changed jobs and was still young, was wearing so many expensive things, but Kent had probably bought those for her. Using money he stole from the company.
And apparently you've been taking a lot of unauthorized absences and showing up late recently too. Even without the embezzlement and affair, your reputation within the company had already fallen significantly.
He was probably neglecting his work because he was too absorbed in his affair with her. I couldn't help but look at him, who was being far too selfish, with eyes of contempt.
Good grief, not only an affair, but criminal acts too. Hey Scott, we're definitely going to consult the police about this, right?
Yeah. Actually, I've already consulted with them. When the word police came up, Kent apologized profusely on the spot, shedding beads of nervous sweat.
I am terribly sorry. It was just a momentary lapse.
Huh, so you embezzled funds on a momentary impulse? Could it be that your affair was also just a whim? And hurting my daughter and granddaughter was just a careless mistake, not your true intentions? Well then, I suppose it can't be helped. Did you think I would say that? Anger that couldn't be suppressed seeped into my dad's voice. When Kent looked at him while trembling, my dad had a demonic expression unlike any I had ever seen.
That's not it. The affair wasn't my fault. Hallie stopped giving me attention, so I got lonely, and…
Even now, Kent was still trying to somehow justify himself as not being in the wrong. Seeing his pathetic figure, I was disgusted with my own lack of discernment, wondering why I ever married this man. Suppressing the urge to hold my head in my hands, I refuted his excuses. I was too busy every day to give you attention. I mean, you never helped with any housework or child rearing at all. You couldn't even clear your own dishes after eating, could you? That's right, he left even his personal matters entirely up to me. He must have thought that if he stayed silent, I would do everything for him. Even when Hilda was little, I once told Kent you could at least clear your own dishes after eating. But Kent replied, "Ugh, what a pain. Isn't that kind of thing a woman's job?" Unlike you, I work in the super busy most important department. Let me relax at home at least. At that point, I realized it was a waste of time to say anything to this man.
Wasn't it hard enough just taking care of Hilda? But I had to take care of you too. And yet, you had an affair because you were lonely, you say? How incredibly selfish can you be?
His shoulders shook in surprise at my shouting. I had never gotten this angry at him before. Because I thought it was pointless to get angry. At this point, it's futile to say anything to this man, no matter what. When I think that if I had divorced him as soon as I realized that Hilda might not have gotten hurt that day, I feel angry at my own error in judgment. I wonder what your mistress will do if you get sued by the company and fired. Oh, of course I'm going to sue you and your mistress for alimony. Even if you lose your job and have no money after compensating for the embezzlement, I will sue you mercilessly. Your mistress did say it was totally fine for me to sue for alimony after all. In response to this, Kent made a surprised face and then deeply apologized to me.
Please don't divorce me, I'm begging you. I'll break up with Regina right away. I'll never cheat again from now on, so please. Forgive me.
It's too late. I already submitted the divorce papers. That day, after leaving Hilda with my parents, I went to the municipal office and filed the divorce papers. They were successfully accepted, so I am no longer in Ingram. We are already just strangers to each other. But he continued in a panicked tone, disregarding all that.
Then let's remarry right now. Hilda is still little. She'd be better off with a dad, right? I'm sure Hilda thinks so too.
The instant I heard those words, my anger exploded.
How dare you say that?
Unable to contain my rage, I slammed my fist down on the desk in front of me. A loud bang rang out, and my dad and the president looked at me with startled faces.
You said this right in front of Hilda while getting intimate with your mistress. That Hilda doesn't get attached to you, and lately she's not cute at all, just like me. Can you imagine how much those words hurt Hilda? You have no right to call yourself a dad.
Hearing this, Dad's expression turned demonic again. You bastard. You said that to my precious granddaughter? And in front of Hilda too. How could you do such a thing? The president also glared at him with an angry look. I have a grandchild around the same age. Just imagining my adorable grandchild going through the same thing makes my blood boil. Kent looked at me, my dad, and the president. Everyone's faces showed anger and contempt toward Kent. No one here was on his side.
That's not it. I didn't do anything wrong. Shut up! Yelp!
Kent let out a pathetic cry at my shout.
All you can do is shut up and atone for your crimes. Don't ever call yourself Hilda's dad again. If you try to get involved with Hilda in the future, I'll use any means necessary to remove you from her life.
My seriousness must have gotten through to him, because his expression turned to one of despair. Finally realizing he was losing everything, his position, his money, his family, he suddenly collapsed on the spot, his energy spent. I drove the final nail in the coffin for him.
You were blathering on about how it's better for Hilda to have a dad too, right? Well, Hilda said she hates you. She was absolutely thrilled when she found out I was divorcing you and cutting ties. No way. She doesn't need a dad. A sweet child like her doesn't need the worst scum like you.
When I informed him that he was thoroughly despised even by his own daughter, he started crying, tears streaming down his face. But all of this was he just deserts.
You don't even have the right to be hurt.
Kent listened to my words, hanging his head powerlessly. After that, the president promptly fired Kent. Apparently, it had leaked out from somewhere that he embezzled funds, that he cheated with the receptionist, and that I had connections to the president. I've asked Mrs. Ingram from accounting to fix an invoice I messed up because it was a hassle, acting all high and mighty. I've also taken out my frustration on Mrs. Ingram when she pointed out my mistakes. My appearance is that of an ordinary female employee. I'm not flashy, but rather plain, and usually can't talk back when spoken to forcefully. Perhaps because of that, there are quite a few employees who have a condescending attitude toward me. Centering on those employees, the people who found out my true identity apparently turned pale and started trembling. Well, I'm quitting the company anyway, and I have no intention of doing anything to them at this point, but I just hope this makes them reflect and fix their attitudes of looking down on others. As for Kent's embezzlement, it seems Regina was also an accomplice. Before long, she was also given notice of termination. The president had consulted the police about her case as well. Also, when her parents found out about this incident, she was apparently kicked out of her family home where she was living. Since she was a big spender with hardly any savings, rumor has it she borrowed immediate living expenses from a shady consumer finance company. Regina sought help from people at the company, but there was no one there who would assist a criminal. With no one to help her, she seemed to be driven into a corner. Some time later, the two were arrested by the police. It was briefly covered on the local news, but quickly got buried under other news stories, and the incident faded from everyone's memory. By the way, before he was arrested, Kent called me.
Please, let's start over. I'm truly reflecting on what happened and have had a change of heart. I'll never do something this stupid again.
After divorcing him and going through the procedures to claim alimony, I had blocked all his contact information. However, he purposely used a different mobile phone to contact me.
Truly reflecting? April Fool's Day was ages ago. I can't believe a word a vile person like you says. Then what do I have to do for you to believe me?
As Kent got slightly worked up on the other end of the phone, I vaguely thought in the back of my mind that people don't change that easily. Just then, someone snatched my mobile phone from the side.
Hilda!
Hilda brought the phone to her face, expressionless. Hello, Dad, long time no talk.
Hilda!
Kent let out a happy voice. Even though he had called Hilda not cute, his voice was filled with genuine joy. However, in contrast to Kent's delighted voice, Hilda replied coldly.
Don't ever call Mom again. Huh? You still don't get it? We both hate you. I think it's really great that Mom divorced you. Every day is so much fun now that you're gone.
What she was saying was true. After divorcing Kent and moving into my parents' house, the smile on her face increased. Seeing that smile made me finally realize just how stressful living with Kent had been for Hilda. I still regret not divorcing him much earlier.
I don't want to see your face or hear your voice. I don't even want to call you Dad anymore. If you understand, never contact us again.
Kent was at a loss for words on the other end of the phone after being thoroughly rejected by Hilda herself. He probably never thought he would be hated to this extent.
So with that said, don't get involved with us anymore. If you contact us again, I'll consult a lawyer to deal with it.
Leaving that parting remark, I ended the call. To be safe, I blocked the number he called from.
Hey, he won't call anymore?
I put on a smile to reassure Hilda, who asked in an anxious voice. He'll never call again. When I replied like that, she murmured good and showed a relieved smile. Since then, Kent never called or tried to contact us again. Maybe it was because he heard the word lawyer, or maybe he had too much on his plate with the police getting involved. Or perhaps he was struggling financially from paying the alimony settlement and didn't have the leeway. Well, whatever situation he has fallen into, it has nothing to do with me and Hilda anymore. Currently, Hilda and I are living comfortably at my parents' house. Thanks to my parents taking care of Hilda, it's made things much easier for me. After quitting that company, I quickly found a job at a company close to my parents' home. Thanks to the accounting experience I built up at my previous company, I was able to become a full-time employee even at this age. However, I can't keep relying on my parents forever.
I'm thinking it's about time to move out and find a place for just me and Hilda to live.
I said that, intending to consult Dad, who also runs a real estate business and is knowledgeable about that kind of thing, but Dad replied in a fluster.
What are you saying? I want you two to keep living in this house forever. Both Sierra and I want to always be with Hilda. If there's anything you're unhappy with, I'll fix it, so please don't say you're moving out.
He said that with the intensity of someone about to cling to me, which flustered me too, so I ended up replying.
Oh, okay, I get it. I won't say I'm moving out. Let us stay in this house forever.
So because of that, my dad is making preparations to transfer the house and land to my name. Well, if that makes my parents happy, I intend to graciously accept and continue living in this house. Hilda also seems happy surrounded by her beloved grandparents, and seeing her smile makes me feel blessed every day. A lot happened and it was tough, but I don't regret the path I chose. From now on, I'm willing to do anything for the sake of her smile. I'm so glad you were born safely. Having been discharged from the hospital safely, I couldn't help but mutter to myself in relief. The birth was through a cesarean section. The physical toll was more significant than I had anticipated, and my body still ached from the surgery. However, looking at the babies made me feel it was all worth it. The excitement of starting a new life outweighed the anxiety. Just as I was thinking about taking it easy, my husband, Joseph, spoke up.
Let's celebrate tonight. Let's invite all the relatives.
My name is Madison. I'm a 27-year-old housewife. My husband, Joseph, is a 29-year-old office worker. We had longed for a child, and finally, our much-awaited child arrived, increasing our family size. I was anxious as it was my first pregnancy, but the gynecologist was very kind and trustworthy. On one of the routine checkup days, I encountered a surprise.
Madison, you're having twins.
I was so shocked by the doctor's words that all I could say was,
Oh, is that so?
While I loved children and was happy, the anxiety I felt also doubled. When I told my husband, who had returned from work, that we were expecting twins, he said, Well, I understand the anxiety, but stress isn't good for the fetus. Once they're born, you'll be too busy raising them to think about anything else. He seemed quite unfazed by it. That's true, I said, though I was still concerned about his reaction. It felt somewhat distant. But if I let myself be crushed by anxiety now, it would affect the babies. I resolved to do what I could for the babies. Encouraged by my husband's words. As the checkups became more frequent, the doctor would say, "Please come in immediately if you have any concerns about your body." Carrying and delivering twins was apparently more taxing on the body. The morning sickness and abdominal tightening were severe, and I experienced discomforts I had never felt before, but I managed to get through each day with help from my husband when needed. As the due date approached, even slight movements made me breathless. It was hard to believe how much my stamina had decreased from before I was pregnant. But there was no time to worry about that. My belly grew quickly, perhaps because I was carrying twins. After discussing with my doctor, we decided on a cesarean section for the delivery. The thought of surgery was frightening, but I was relieved when it was successfully completed, and I heard the crying for the first time. Because the surgery was significant, the physical toll was substantial, and the hospital stay extended. I couldn't move around much immediately due to my condition. The doctor advised me to rest, and I followed those instructions. I had messaged my husband, wanting him to come see the twins since they were safely born. "Today, I have a drinking party with senior members of the company. So, I'm sorry, I can't make it there," was his reply. The next day and the day after. "It's a critical time, so there are many drinking parties. Sorry," he messaged, and ultimately, my husband spent the days following the birth indulging in drinking parties while I was hospitalized. At first, I was concerned about his diet and health, but gradually, my dissatisfaction grew. "What's with that? What's with your company? Our children were just born, you know?" I had the urge to retort that to my husband. In those moments, looking at the children I had given birth to soothed me and helped me remain calm. Before being admitted, despite his complaints, my husband had taken over the tasks I couldn't do. Now, knowing he's working hard for our family, I resolved to do my best with the housework and childcare. Preparing for discharge, I asked the doctor about parenting and shared my anxieties with my parents. Before I knew it, the day of my discharge arrived. I expressed my gratitude to everyone involved during my hospital stay and left the hospital. My husband was there on the day of my discharge. "I'm so glad you were born safely," I muttered to myself, relieved. Stepping outside, breathing in the fresh air, made me feel refreshed. Despite the pain from the cesarean section, seeing the twins made me glad I went through with it. I was excited yet anxious about starting a new life. After being discharged safely, the doctor advised me to continue taking it easy. I planned to gradually get accustomed to being active again. As I was thinking this, "Tonight's a celebration," my husband said with a smile. I realized that today was the first day our family of 4 would all be together. Reflecting on how my husband had thought of doing something special for this day while I was in the hospital made me happy. I felt silly for assuming he would just be indulging in drinking parties and not giving it any thought. I told my husband, "I'm so happy you're celebrating. Thank you so much, especially with how busy you are every day." I expressed my gratitude. Upon arriving home, the place was a mess, but I was too tired to care. I soon fell asleep. Suddenly, "There's no time to laze around. It's a celebration party, so could you please put on some makeup and dress up a bit? I've invited all the relatives, so hurry and get ready. I've even booked a large venue," said my husband, raising his voice. I was shocked by his words, having assumed we would celebrate quietly at home with just the four of us. And I hadn't been informed about hosting a large party, leaving me unable to comprehend the situation. Just discharged and still feeling weak, I worried about the baby's well-being in a large crowd.
What do you mean by gathering all the relatives? Are you throwing a big party for our baby's birth celebration? I'm sorry, but we can't bring them. It's too risky with a large group for the baby's low immunity.
I would have gone myself out of obligation, but I didn't want to expose our children to any danger. After much thought, can we postpone it? I'm not fully recovered, and if it's not possible to delay, could you go by yourself? I firmly said. Then, my husband retorted,
After such a long hospital stay, you're still not recovered? What's the point if the mother of the children doesn't attend the party? You should be back to normal after giving birth, right?
Everyone's waiting, so hurry up. He left ahead, leaving me at a loss for words. Left alone bewildered, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. I let out a sigh. I reached for my makeup, pondering if I should go, but couldn't bring myself to proceed. Despite wondering if there was a safe way to bring the twins, I knew there wasn't. Feeling unwell, I thought of contacting Mary, my mother-in-law, hoping she would understand my situation as a woman who has gone through childbirth. I reached for my cell phone. At that moment, a phone call from Mary came. Is it a phone call urging me to hurry to the party? I panicked, but decided to answer with courage. Hello? I said, and Mary, sounding a bit rushed.
Hello? Madison? I just wanted to check on something. Is now a good time?
She asked. After I assured her it was okay.
First off, congratulations on your discharge. How are you feeling? I heard from Joseph that you're hosting a baby's debut party right after being discharged today. Is that true?
Mary said, seizing the opportunity. About that, I was just suddenly informed by Joseph a while ago. I've had a cesarean section, and the wound is still hurting. Plus, I don't think it's good for the twins to be in a place with many people, so I'm not in a condition to attend. I explained. Mary responded,
That's understandable. A party on the day of your discharge is unthinkable. He had me believing you were okay with it, which surprised me. I'll give that foolish son of mine a call and explain from scratch about childbirth and postpartum. Please, rest at home.
Relieved, I couldn't help but say, That's great, and slumped down where I was. However, a few minutes later, my husband called. As soon as I answered, Hey!
Did you complain about me to Mom? I got an earful from her. Look, childbirth is over, so anything you say now just sounds like excuses. And about the baby's immunity you were worried about, it's not like we're going to a crowded shopping mall. It's just family, so it should be fine. Women always overreact. You're a mom now, so you need to get your act together, he said, realizing my husband doesn't listen to women. I hung up the phone, dumbfounded. Shortly after, the doorbell rang. Thinking my husband had returned, impatient for me, I went to check and found Mary, infuriated, standing there. Madison, I'm sorry for the trouble Joseph has caused you, she said, offering me a gift. I know it might be too much, but I thought this might be a tough time for you, so I came to help. Mary asked if she could come in. Honestly, it's a bit of a mess, but I really appreciate it, I replied, letting her in. Joseph never listens to me, so I'm thinking of calling Dad later too, Mary said. Curious about what Joseph would say in front of David, my father-in-law, I asked to listen in on that call. Mary continued.
I've already called the relatives. They said it's okay to just pass some small gifts at your home. It had been a while since I'd seen the relatives. I felt bad but was glad they were willing to come over, as I had been looking forward to seeing them under normal circumstances.
Thank you so much.
I expressed my gratitude to Mary, and just as I was about to get up to clean, she quickly intervened. Madison, you've just had surgery. Your recovery is the most important thing right now, and as a mom, you should focus all your energy on the babies. Leave the cleaning to me. She then swiftly cleaned up the mess that had accumulated while my husband had neglected the house during my hospital stay. Really, Joseph can't do anything on his own. Madison, thank you always for everything. Her words offered me great comfort. Thanks to her, I could focus on my babies, finding time to sleep between feedings. Once the cleaning was done and things had settled, David and the relatives arrived. They had been invited by my husband but rushed over after Mary called them to explain the situation and scold my husband.
It's been a while. Congratulations.
I received their blessings and gifts one after another, feeling very happy. Only the in-laws met the baby, as the relatives waited in the living room without entering the room. My husband was not around, probably still waiting somewhere for me to arrive. David, having heard the situation from Mary, "I'm sorry for the trouble Joseph has caused. I'm about to call him now, is that okay?" he asked. Having just been harshly spoken to by Joseph, I was accustomed to it and curious about everything he thought and did.
It's okay. Please feel free to call him. It's something I requested,
I replied. David then called my husband. Suddenly, we could hear some noise in the background.
Hello? Oh, Dad? Where is everyone?
My husband sounded confused on the phone. David pretended he was the only one there and questioned my husband. I heard you were planning a big party today. That would be too much for Madison, who's just been discharged. Why would you plan something so reckless? As David spoke.
Recently, I've been going out drinking and having fun with colleagues, discovering the joy of parties. While Madison was in the hospital, I could do as I pleased, but with the children born, that's not possible anymore. So, I thought we'd have Madison prepare everything and have fun today. Dad, you must have thought the same before your kids were born, right?
Everyone present grimaced at my husband's nonchalant response, lumping all men together in his justification. David, holding back his anger. It's too much for Madison right now, so the party's off. But we've gathered the relatives at your house. They'll be here soon, so come back quickly. He tried to keep his composure as he spoke. It seemed like David restrained his anger, as it might deter my husband from returning if he said everyone is waiting angrily. My husband replied,
Really? Okay, I'm at the arcade with colleagues. I'll head back once we're at a good stopping point.
With a seemingly cheerful tone, my husband said those words, perhaps thinking that men would sympathize with each other no matter what. The phone conversation had shed light on many aspects of my husband, and I felt a sense of despair as we were about to start parenting. David asserted, I will never forgive Joseph for this. Madison, I'm sorry for imposing during such a tough time at your home. I'm going to set that fool straight today. Please give us a chance. The relatives also showed their support.
Madison, we're on your side. If there's anything troubling you, please let us know.
Their warm words almost brought me to tears. Upon his return, my husband greeted the gathered visitors. Thank you all for coming. Please, make yourselves at home. He entered the room formally, glanced around the living room, and seeing me in the bedroom. Hey, Madison, at least offer some coffee to my parents. he whispered angrily. In-laws were furious upon hearing this. Mary said,
I told Madison to focus on taking care of the children. Don't bother her. Since you're the one who wanted this party, why don't you handle the preparations?
Defending me. David also scolded.
Joseph, enough is enough. Move yourself before you speak. How can you leave everything to Madison right after childbirth? What kind of nerve do you have?
I retorted.
You plan a party on your own, but leave the preparation to me while you leisurely hang out at an arcade?
Don't make me laugh.
Seems like you had quite the fun roaming around while I was hospitalized.
My husband's face turning red.
You eavesdropped on the conversation with Dad? You're the lowest.
He avoided apologizing or addressing his actions. Then, a male relative with children courageously confronted my husband.
How can you treat Madison like she's invisible? I heard from Mom that a cesarean section is extremely tough. My wife went through it too, and just looking at the wound makes you realize the pain. You think it's all over once the baby is born, don't you? She had surgery on her abdomen,
he said. In fact, among the relatives, there were families with many children and those who had experienced cesarean sections.
Look, perhaps you never visited Madison in the hospital, that's why you can say such things. Just one look at the wound, and you'll understand the ordeal of childbirth and why she can't strain herself.
A mother among them persuaded. Some relatives were furious. Being scolded by so many made my husband start to understand that the women weren't exaggerating. For the first time, he appeared so diminished and small. With the strong support of in-laws and relatives, I felt fearless. After everyone left, I was wrong earlier. I haven't experienced childbirth, nor have I been involved in childcare yet, but I was speaking out of turn. Hearing from the relative who's already a dad made me realize my immaturity. I'm truly sorry. My husband hastily apologized. However, his apology seemed calculated, as if performing in public would gain forgiveness. I hoped his apology wouldn't just be words, but followed by actions. The in-laws felt the same and visited only when my husband was around, helping clean if I hadn't managed to, which was a great help. They declared to let my husband take charge of the baby care as much as possible, supporting him in the process. I'm sorry for everything. Thank you so much. I expressed my gratitude. It's okay. Please make sure to rest well. It would be terrible if you overdid it and something happened. And Mary reassured me. My husband declared, All right, I'm going to be more involved in parenting. I'll become a cool dad like the celebrities on TV. Getting all excited. Then, David immediately retorted, What you should aim for is to be a good husband and a good dad. Instead of trying to emulate what's on TV, pay attention to Madison and the twins right in front of you and act accordingly. His words made me burst into laughter. Even with the support of the in-laws, my husband realized how hard it was to take care of newborn twins, even for a short while. It's exhausting. My body aches, and I'm always on edge. Yet, he made an effort. He began to appreciate how hard I worked during the day, expressing his gratitude daily. Though still a bit clumsy, he has become capable of managing the household chores on his own. I cannot thank the in-laws enough for making my husband aware. As a result, we have become a couple that respects each other and continues to maintain a good relationship with the in-laws. As our children grew, I know new challenges and worries will arise, but I look forward to overcoming them together. You're only useful for giving birth to an heir, Karen, my mother-in-law, said as she hugged my son tightly and nuzzled his cheek. The same mother-in-law who was so kind before I had a child, now glared at me with an expression I'd never seen before. The realization hit me hard as she continued to berate me nonstop. This was her true nature. Speechless, I watched as Karen laughed.
I'll make sure to raise this child as a proper heir.
My name is Abigail. I'm 28 years old, and I've been married to Christopher for 4 years now. We met in college and got married after graduating. His hometown is a plane ride away from my hometown. I had planned to attend a nearby university and work in my hometown, but those plans changed completely. Christopher, a year older than me, received a job offer in his hometown and moved back right after graduation. We ended up in a long-distance relationship for about a year, but we were doing well. Both of us were raised by single parents and had to work part-time outside of our classes to pay for our tuition. We never really went on typical dates and were used to not seeing each other often. Once he started working, Christopher seemed to have more free time and would often check in on me.
"You're not a kid anymore. Take a good look at your own mom,"
he'd say, but he was still worried about me. Time flew by, and soon it was time for me to finish my studies and decide on a job offer. I was expected to get my childcare certification, so I hoped to work in a daycare. The job offers were from daycares in my hometown and his. Moving to his hometown meant we could get married as planned. However, my mom was living alone in my hometown. My grandmother had passed away just before I went to college, leaving her feeling lonely. I had decided to return home after graduation, but started to waver after dating Christopher. Neither my mom nor Christopher pressured me. I often talked to my mom about Christopher over the phone, so she was okay with the marriage, and Christopher, having been raised in a single-parent household as well, understood my feelings towards my mom very well. After much deliberation, I decided to marry Christopher. It helped that the job prospects in his hometown were better, and Karen seemed to really like me. At first, we lived in the apartment Christopher had already been renting. Unlike when I was a student, I made sure to contribute half of our living expenses from my own salary. As we both worked, we had a bit more financial leeway, allowing us to go on overnight trips once a month. We felt like we had truly grown up and even started thinking about having children when suddenly, our apartment was nearly destroyed in a fire. The cause was unclear, but it was suspected to be due to another resident's negligence. Fortunately, there were no injuries, and we weren't home at the time. However, losing all our furniture, appliances, and possessions that we had only had for a few years was a huge shock. Karen caught wind of the fire that very day and immediately rushed over in a taxi, finding us standing in shock in front of our charred apartment. She ushered us into her car and headed straight to her house, having seen the breaking news on TV. "From now on, you two should just live with us at home. Come on, no need for such gloomy faces." Despite her assertiveness, her words gradually lifted our spirits. With little more than the clothes on our backs, we found everything we needed at my in-laws' house. The family once being farmers, their land and house were spacious, with more rooms than Karen could use, so she prepared one for us. Thus, a temporary living arrangement with Karen was smoothly decided, and Christopher apologized, feeling indebted. "You have nothing to apologize for. Rather, we're incredibly grateful." Karen treated me like her own daughter and was youthful and lively. She accepted our working lifestyles and took on most of the household chores. Feeling it was wrong to leave everything to her, I helped out on weekends. "Abigail, you're such a hard worker. You should rest on weekends. Besides, you contribute more than enough to the household expenses." After many discussions, my husband and I decided to settle down in this house. "We'll contribute to the household expenses in exchange for taking care of the house." my husband prefaced before explaining our cohabitation arrangement. Karen was delighted, her eyes sparkling with joy.
Leave the housework to me. It's embarrassing, but I can't earn money outside like you two anymore. Having you here makes every day fun. I'm looking forward to our future together.
And so, our permanent living arrangement with Karen was decided. Thanks to Karen, I could focus on my job, and a year passed smoothly. However, I began to feel unwell. Karen noticed something was off and urged me to go to the hospital. Despite lacking clear symptoms like coughing or sneezing, I felt an unusual tiredness and nausea, so I took some time off and went to the gynecologist. There, I discovered I was pregnant. Though unexpected, the ultrasound clearly showed a new life. Returning home with trembling steps of joy, Karen greeted me with concern. Upon hearing the news of my pregnancy, Karen clapped her hands in delight and started preparing a feast. Of course, my husband was thrilled too. Seeing my husband caress my belly, Karen advised,
"From now on, it's going to be tougher for Abigail, so you need to step up."
Watching them, I felt determined to do my best for the baby. During checkups, we learned it was a boy, and Karen, ecstatic about her first grandson, was overjoyed. Afterward, Karen became even more attentive to my well-being, closely monitoring my every move. While her concern for me was manageable, her behavior towards my husband was a bit much. Insisting he read thick parenting books and meticulously instructing us on the changes in my body and baby's development. Having a knowledgeable partner in parenting was helpful, but with both of us working, Karen's intense approach was a bit worrying. Karen seemed to have a strong desire for a boy. Though the necessity of continuing the family business had ceased, the pressure of not ending the long-standing family name weighed heavily on her. Indeed, Karen herself faced considerable pressure from relatives until she became pregnant with my husband. Even after his birth, she was extensively advised on parenting by her late husband's father and his mother, which might explain why Karen is so overzealous now, I thought. Upon entering a stable phase, I informed my workplace and discussed maternity and parental leave dates. Karen repeatedly suggested,
"Why don't you quit your job right now? Isn't it harmful to your health?"
But each time, I firmly resisted. Honestly, as days passed, Karen seemed to become overprotective towards me, and being at work provided a breather from that. I wanted to genuinely enjoy the anticipation of the baby's arrival, but felt stifled in such an environment. Yet, I couldn't discuss this with my husband, who was under even stricter scrutiny from Karen. At times, Karen seemed almost possessed. Eventually, enduring the pressure, I safely gave birth to a boy. Karen visited every day during my hospital stay, holding the baby as long as she could. A nurse had to subtly hint for her to leave. It felt absurdly excessive, even for a first grandchild. The strangeness became apparent soon after. Karen had arrived early on discharge day, having persuaded a known taxi service to bring her. The nurse rushed preparations upon hearing this, leaving me filled with apologies towards the hospital staff. It turned out Karen was held back by the reception until official patient release time. During this period, Karen called me multiple times directly.
"I came because I was worried about you and the baby. I want to see you as soon as possible,"
she said tearfully, despite having seen us the day before. I couldn't firmly address her as she came in place of my busy husband. And after a few hours, we were finally greeted by Karen's embrace outside. Karen didn't let go of my son the entire ride home, but considering she had waited for hours, I overlooked it. Once home, I immediately changed my son's diaper, with Karen anxiously hovering. The moment I stepped away, she quickly took him in her arms. Addressing Karen, I mentioned, "I need to start the laundry from the hospital stay." No response came. repeating myself.
Just hurry up. I'm busy, don't talk to me.
She glared at me in a way I'd never seen before. Stunned by her sudden change, Karen continued without regard.
Relatives are coming, so prepare the dishes. I've already done the cooking.
She pointed towards the kitchen with her chin, signaling me. Go. Such a drastic transformation was bewildering. Without time to settle, I began preparing for the visitors, feeling pain throughout my unrecovered body. When my son cried for feeding, Karen reluctantly handed him over, but otherwise stayed close, unwilling to part. Karen's interest was solely focused on my son. What was supposed to be about 5 guests turned into 10, including some neighbors who weren't even relatives. Understandably, I was too busy preparing to greet anyone. While I was groaning in postpartum pain, one of the female guests noticed.
Hey, are you okay?
She asked. Before I could respond, Karen interjected loudly.
She just got discharged today. You know how these modern women exaggerate their postpartum recovery.
Just discharged? Sit down right away. We'll handle the rest, the woman said, triggering a commotion among the gathered guests, who seemed to have been uninformed. Some attempted to stand up, possibly upset by the situation. Karen, perhaps panicking, started showing off my son to each guest, boasting.
None of you have an heir, do you? Better hurry up.
The atmosphere instantly tensed. As everyone watched in astonishment, Karen's tirade continued unabated.
I endured pressure from my husband, Karen, and their relatives to give birth to my son, raised him alone after my husband passed away, and now, my son has produced another son, continuing the lineage. While you all idle away, some of you don't have much time left. I won't be responsible for what happens.
And, as Karen laughed derisively, guests began leaving, despite the unfinished conversation. The meticulously prepared food remained untouched as everyone departed.
Oh dear, what a waste of food. They should have enjoyed themselves more.
Now, off you go.
Christopher and I will take good care of this child.
Huh? Suddenly, Karen turned and pointed at me.
You've given us an heir, so you're no longer needed here. Go back to your beloved job or whatever. You're dispensable to me now. Could you leave immediately, leaving the child behind? Or try for a second son if you wish to be favored again.
Faced with Karen's sarcastic smile, something inside me snapped.
Understood. I'll be leaving.
My belongings were untouched since returning from the hospital, so I packed some clothes and personal items, ready to carry them. Karen, having lost interest in me, didn't bother to see me off, instead laying my son on a new bed and heading to the bathroom. Without waiting for a send-off I didn't want, I decided to leave.
I'll leave the child with you then. Please take care of everything.
That was the last thing I said to Karen, who, unsurprisingly, didn't respond. I boarded a bus with my luggage, planning to rest at a nearby hotel. The next day, still in pain, I checked out, planning to head home by intercity bus. Upon powering up my mobile phone, I found a slew of missed calls from Karen. Turning off my phone the night before had been the right move, anticipating this situation. When Karen called again, I decided to answer.
What's going on? I was worried because I couldn't reach you. Where are you now? You're not worried about me, are you? Just answer the question. Where are you? I'm heading back to my parents' house with my son. That's not what we agreed on.
Karen screamed until her voice cracked. Why?
I left your child, Christopher, behind, didn't I? I'm taking my son to my parents.
Whether Karen grasped the situation or not, she let out a growl like a beast. Since she had entered the bathroom and hadn't seen me when I was leaving the in-laws' house, she hadn't realized I took my son with me. She must have left the bathroom after I was completely gone, too late to catch up with me. That led to her calling me incessantly, until she finally reached me once I turned my phone back on. Without informing my husband of my departure, both must have been in a panic. Though it was harsh on my husband, I had to get away from Karen.
It's cruel to drag a newborn around for hours. You brought over 10 people the day I was discharged. I'm in a much better situation. Besides, my mom came to pick us up, so we're resting on the way. Oh, and my mom said she won't let my son see you again, so we won't be in contact anymore. Thanks for everything. Take care.
I hung up without waiting for Karen's reply, blocked her number, and headed straight home. Upon reaching home, my mom had already prepared a clean baby bed.
It's been tough. You must be exhausted. We can talk later, just rest now.
My son had been constantly crying since yesterday, and realizing the hardship I put him through brought me to tears, while my mom comforted me. It was a moment of release from all the tension. My son, oblivious to my state, brought brightness to our once solitary home, as my mom effortlessly soothed him. A month passed, and just as I started to relax, an unknown number called. I had a bad feeling about it. Sure enough, the caller was Karen.
Where did you take my son? Are you there?
Hearing Karen's voice after a while, it seemed much aged.
Taking Christopher along with the heir, how cruel.
Knowing arguing was futile, I handed the phone to my husband beside me.
Hello, Mom.
It's Christopher.
The business trip I mentioned was a lie. I've been talking with Abigail and her mom for the past month, and I'm shocked at how you've changed. I can't believe you treated Abigail so poorly. I have to prioritize my wife and son. A moving company will collect my belongings soon, so don't touch the boxes in the storage. Also, I've quit my job, so calling there is pointless. Please don't contact us anymore.
My husband ended the call, making a difficult decision to cut ties quickly to avoid developing any further attachment. The day after I left my in-laws' house, I received a message from my husband. He decided to cut ties with Karen immediately after learning she had tried to take my son from me and driving me out. He promptly informed his company of the situation, processed his resignation, and secretly packed his belongings. Reunited with our son who had taken refuge here, my husband cried for a long time as he held him. With my husband's help, childcare became manageable and I finally felt at ease. He has already started looking for a new job. With the skills he's developed in his previous job, he's likely to find a good position, even as a mid-career hire. We soon moved out of our house. The land cost a bit more, so my mom covered all the initial expenses for the new home. After our move, Karen, in a panic, flew to our old address, only to find the house demolished and the lot empty. Eventually, she called my husband, learning about our relocation. My husband then blocked Karen's number, cutting off her last means of contact with us. Messages from a cousin my husband has always been close to occasionally reach him. According to these messages, Karen has become the neighborhood's laughingstock, a lonely old woman who lost her grandson, son, and daughter-in-law. Especially among those gathered on the day I was discharged, who Karen had always boasted to about giving birth to Christopher, now ridicule her. The neighbors have teamed up to spread bad words about Karen, who, unable to bear the situation, sold her house and disappeared. The hoarseness in her voice when she last called might have been due to the treatment she was already receiving. What goes around comes around, indeed. I hope Karen lives her remaining years with dignity, remembering this lesson. As for us, we are constantly facing new challenges every day. I can't take my eyes off our son's daily growth, and my mom seems rejuvenated by his energy. My husband's re-employment went smoothly, and he treasures the moments with our son amidst his busy schedule. Surrounded by people who cherish my son and me, I'm living a peaceful and happy life. Our son is going to live with you, Mom. Even if he's sick, being with your grandchild every day is a blessing, right? The voice of my son on the phone dripped with malice, as if mocking me. I hugged my grandson tightly, covering his ears so he wouldn't hear that voice. My grandson, who just turned 7, was recently taken to the hospital. There, he was diagnosed with a certain illness, and my son and his wife left him at my house. Coming home from work, I found my grandson sitting dejectedly at the entrance. My heart nearly leaped out of my chest. He told me himself, "I was abandoned by Mom and Dad because I'm sick." I wish they could understand how I felt. I immediately called my son. What followed was a brazen declaration of abandonment. My daughter-in-law, likely beside my son, let out a vulgar laugh, saying, "We don't want to catch his illness. Let the short-lived elderly take care of him." She hurled insults worse than my son's and cut off the call with a harsh laugh. The phone, abruptly disconnected, never connected again. Looking at my trembling grandson in my arms, I made up my mind. I will raise him. First of all, my name is Frida. I'm 57 and a company employee. I married my husband at 22 and gave birth to our son, Morty, the following year. My husband adored Morty, and the three of us lived happily together.
He's so adorable. I'm so happy such a cute child was born to us,
my husband would say, holding Morty and beaming with joy. But that happiness didn't last long. When Morty was 2, my husband suddenly fell ill and passed away. I was heartbroken, but I had no time to grieve. I had to raise Morty alone. From then on, I worked tirelessly, raising Morty as a single mother. I never remarried. Luckily, I had been a full-time employee since before marriage, so I managed to raise Morty without financial struggles. Now Morty is 34. He works as a company employee in a general business, but Morty has always been somewhat flighty and easily influenced. He got his current job because a college senior suggested it, and he just went along with it. When Morty was 26, he married a woman his age named Maya. Maya was very strong-willed, and I never had a good impression of her even during their dating days. For instance, Maya would frequently visit our house but never once said hello or goodbye. I gently brought this up to Maya at one point. "Maya, it's great you come to visit, but I'd appreciate it if you'd say hello when you arrive." Maya reacted defiantly, visibly annoyed. "What? You don't have the right to tell me what to do. I'm a guest here. I'm doing you a favor by visiting. It's really unpleasant to be told such arbitrary things." I was stunned by her brash response. Morty, on his part, would say things like, "Mom, don't be so stiff." I thought it was common sense to greet when visiting someone's home, but it seemed not to apply to Maya. Morty appeared completely under the thumb of the assertive Maya. After Maya left, I reiterated my point to Morty, but just let it go. He just brushed it off. Incidents like these often happened, so I didn't have a good impression of Maya. Of course, I repeatedly told Morty to be more responsible. The couple rented an apartment after their marriage and started living near our house. The following year, they had their first son, Darren. My first grandchild. Children grow up so fast, and in no time, Darren turned 7. One day, as I was returning from work and my house came into view, I noticed someone sitting at the entrance. Who could that be? As I got closer, I realized it was Darren. Having been busy with work recently and not seeing my son's family or Darren, I was both surprised and overjoyed to see him after so long.
"Darren, it's been a while. What are you doing here?"
When I called out to him, Darren slowly lifted his face to meet my eyes. "Grandma." Seeing Darren's face after such a long time, I was lost for words. His face had white, patchy areas, and his eyes were swollen red as if he had been crying. I tried to remain as calm as possible and invited Darren inside. And? Darren, what happened? Can you tell Grandma about it? I gently asked him. He nodded slowly and began to speak in bits and pieces. Well, I got a skin disease. I forgot its name because it was complicated, but it's a rare disease. Seeing young Darren's lips quiver and his face turn pale, my heart ached. A rare disease. Is that really what you were told? Yes, Mom and Dad said that. Ever since I got this disease, they stopped looking at my face. And today, they brought me here to Grandma's house and told me to wait for you, and then they went away. Shocked by Darren's story, I hurriedly called Morty. To prevent Darren from hearing the conversation, I asked him to stay in the living room and drink juice while I moved to another room. Morty! I heard from Darren. How could you leave him at our doorstep without telling me anything? Mom, you're back. Yeah, Darren has this rare disease called pityriasis simplex. It's really troublesome. Pityriasis simplex. I remembered hearing that name before. I had seen a feature on it on TV once. Wasn't it just white spots? White spots are common in children and not a rare disease. Is it really a rare disease? The dermatologist said it's pityriasis simplex. It's a complicated name, so it must be rare, right? So, since we could catch it too, Maya suggested you should raise him, and I agreed. So, Mom, please take care of Darren for us. Thanks. What? You call yourselves parents? That's so irresponsible. I shouted in anger at Morty's outrageous statement. Then Maya took over the call, and her shrill voice echoed. Morty and I are still young and have our lives ahead of us. It would be terrible to catch such a creepy skin disease. So let the short-lived elderly take care of him. Bye. With that unilateral shout, the call was disconnected. Stunned, I quickly took out a book from the bookshelf that listed various diseases and their treatments and looked up pityriasis simplex. Thank goodness. It's just white spots. He'll be fine. The research confirmed that pityriasis simplex was not a rare disease and, with proper treatment, could be cured in most cases. I felt relieved and simultaneously furious at my selfish son and daughter-in-law. I realized they had abandoned Darren at our house, assuming it was a rare disease from its complicated name. How selfish of them. I will definitely raise Darren well. I muttered with determination and returned to the living room. I smiled at Darren, who looked anxious. Darren, don't worry. Your illness is curable. Let's go to the hospital together tomorrow. Really? Darren, thinking it was incurable, lit up. Yes, it's not a rare disease, so don't worry. And Darren, from today, you'll live with Grandma. It's okay. I'll make sure you're happy. Let's live together happily. Darren looked a bit bewildered, but then nodded. Thank you, Grandma. And smiled. Time passed, and 9 years went by. I turned 66, and Darren became 16. During these 9 years, I couldn't make any contact with my son and his wife. Darren, in his teenage years, didn't talk much lately but grew up kind, occasionally cooking meals. Now retired, I support Darren with my pension and retirement funds. Then one day, my son and his wife, who disappeared 9 years ago, suddenly appeared at our home. What do you want now, after all this time? I coldly confronted them at the entrance. How dare they show their faces after not contacting us for 9 years? Hey, we saw you on TV the other day. Surprised us. Darren is amazing. Earning so much money at his age, huh? Apparently, they had seen a recent TV interview, Teenage Genius Inventor. Maya, standing next to Morty, also chimed in with a sneer. Getting a patent and all, that's really amazing. You must be so rich now, huh? Indeed, Darren was skilled at inventing, and he had recently obtained a patent. It was clear from their attitude that Morty and Maya believed Darren was making money from his patent and had come here today with that in mind. They hadn't expressed any concern for Darren, they only talked about him becoming rich. They're still the worst couple. Then Darren appeared behind me. He must have heard our conversation.
Hey Darren.
We've come to take you back. A son is a son, even if he suffers from an illness. Let's live together again with your dad and mom. Morty's exaggerated behavior was almost laughable. To this, Darren responded coldly. Huh? Who the heck are you? Darren, now a high school student, was old enough to understand the situation. He realized from the conversation that his parents were after money, and felt no attachment to them, having been abandoned. Morty and Maya seemed taken aback by Darren's indifferent attitude, but quickly regained composure and started talking fluently. Darren is sick, so his life will be tough. That's why Maya and I will support him. Morty declared. What? After you abandoned me, you have the nerve to act all fatherly now? Don't pretend to be a dad. Darren, having listened to them for a while, clicked his tongue in disgust and scoffed. I was also astonished that they still mistakenly thought Darren had a rare disease. Darren's face had completely healed. Morty, Maya, you've been mistaken all along. Darren doesn't have a rare disease. Pityriasis simplex is just white spots, common in children. Darren completely recovered in about a year. Stunned by my explanation, Morty suddenly changed his attitude and shouted. We've been tricked. Screw you. Why didn't you tell us something so important? Maya followed suit. We were kidnapped by an old woman. You've taken our child for 9 years. Give back our child, Frida, you old kidnapper. And cursed at me. Ignoring their rants, Darren quickly took out his mobile phone and called the police. The police are on their way. And just so you know, getting a patent doesn't mean you become rich instantly. You need companies to use the technology, and only then do you get patent fees. It's not some epic-making discovery, nor is it a widely used patent, so it's just a dream to be filthy rich. The money I've received so far has all gone to materials. So, I don't have any money. After Darren explained calmly, Morty and Maya turned red with anger, screaming. What the hell? Then why did you call us here? Seeing their reaction, Darren sighed. I don't know. You came here on your own, so don't get angry at us. Just go home. Seeing Darren laugh, Morty shouted. Don't you get smart with me. His fist was clenched, ready to lash out at Darren, so I instinctively jumped forward to intervene. Just as Morty was about to swing at me, a loud male voice rang out. Stop it! A police officer was outside the window. He had seen Morty about to hit Darren through the curtain and acted quickly. While his shout startled Morty, another officer quietly entered from the entrance, stepping between us and Morty. Morty waved his open hand, feigning innocence. He then sneered at Darren. You might be an inventor or whatever, but don't get cocky. Live with that old woman for the rest of your life. With that parting shot, he left. The police asked if we were okay, and we said yes. After explaining the situation, we were advised not to let my son and his wife into our home again, and I nodded in agreement. The police reassured us they would help if needed, leaving me relieved. After the police left, I asked Darren. Are you okay? Concerned about his mental state. I knew he must be hurt, even if he acted tough, after being treated that way by his biological parents. However, Darren admitted. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't shocked. I knew my parents were the worst for abandoning me without understanding my illness. But I didn't expect them to be that stupid, thinking I'm rich just because of a patent. All those nice words, thinking I'd agree to live with them. He sighed deeply, clearly displeased, and ruffled his hair. Then he looked down at me, smiling. But Grandma, why did you try to protect me when I was about to get hit? I'm 16 now, and I'm bigger than you. I don't need protection. He asked me as if he was dumbfounded, which left me dumbfounded. What are you talking about? No matter how old they get, you want to protect your kids. Their size doesn't matter. Darren groaned softly, then turned away. I'd hate it more if you got hurt, he said gruffly, heading to his room. It seemed he was worried about me. I felt happy, realizing how kind Darren had grown. After that, I quickly contacted a certain person. A few days later, I went to the house where my son and his wife currently lived, accompanied by a certain person. When I rang the doorbell, Morty opened the door lazily and was shocked to see me and the person beside me.
Lean! Why?
The person next to me was Lean, Morty's friend. Morty's voice startled Maya, who also came from the back.
Lean!
Her face turning pale. Ignoring me, the couple was visibly shaken by Lean's arrival. Long time no see, Morty, Maya. Lean greeted them, and Morty, looking agitated.
How did you find this place?
He asked. I answered his question. When you came to our house the other day, you mentioned to Darren that you now live in a single-family home in this town. I didn't miss that.
But how did you find this specific house with just the town's name? We didn't give you any detailed address.
Morty exclaimed in panic.
That's true, knowing just the town's name wouldn't be enough to find your address, so I hired a detective to focus on this town. A detective?
Yes, and it didn't take long for them to find you. Then, I contacted Lean and we decided to come see you together today.
Using a detective is cheating. That's no different from stalking.
Lean glared at Morty.
I've got nothing to say to fraudsters. Anyway, Morty, Maya, return the money I lent you.
Lean's stern voice filled the room, causing the couple to tremble. Lean, a friend of Morty's, had lent them money. I only found out about this after my son and his wife had disappeared for some time. Lean came to my house to consult about lending them money and not being able to contact them anymore. He came all the way to visit me, wondering if they might have returned to a parent's house due to financial struggles so bad that they had to run away to avoid paying him back, and asked me to let him know if I ever found out their whereabouts.
You two told Lean that Darren had a rare disease and you were in a tight spot financially, and got $5,000 from him by playing on his sympathy.
My words made my son and his wife look down, trembling.
It wasn't just Lean, you did the same thing with others, borrowing money here and there. Then, when repayment became difficult, you abandoned Darren at our house and disappeared without paying back anyone, exploiting people's kindness for your own gain. You're the lowest of the low. No. But we really thought Darren had a rare disease. Yes, we really did. That's why we borrowed the money.
Frustrated with their excuses, I shouted.
What are you talking about? Even if you thought so, you never treated Darren's condition. You took him to a dermatologist once and then neglected him, not spending a dime on his treatment. So where's the money you borrowed from your friends? Do you have it with you if you didn't use it for treatment costs? Of course, you don't. You probably squandered it on yourselves. As parents and human beings, you're the absolute worst. Shame on you. Ugh.
They fell silent.
The real reason you left Darren at my house wasn't because you were afraid of his disease spreading, it was to evade the debts you owed. Months before abandoning Darren, you frequently went on trips and started wearing only branded items, didn't you? No, but it's true that we didn't want to be around Darren because his disease was creepy.
Even at this point, they still tried to justify. And with despicable excuses, too. Sighing deeply.
Darren is fortunate not to have grown up with parents like you. He might have ended up with a twisted personality because of you. I'm so glad he has grown into a kind and admirable young man.
I said. My son and his wife made sullen faces, not seeming convinced. Lean said sternly to the two.
I have a good idea who else you've defrauded, so I'm planning to contact them and start a class action lawsuit. You better be prepared. A lawsuit? Wait a minute. Isn't that a bit too drastic?
Too drastic? Not at all. Unless you can repay right now all the money you borrowed from me and others, which I guess you've already spent, right? Lean pressed. My son and his wife were speechless.
I never imagined being betrayed by a longtime friend like you, Morty. I became distrustful of people for a while after you two disappeared. I will never forgive you.
Lean said, glaring at them with hatred. I told my son and his wife. Don't worry about Darren. He's a high school student now, capable of making his own decisions. Please don't contact him anymore. I was firm in cutting ties with them. Months later, despite being threatened, Morty and his wife still hadn't repaid the money. They were sued in a class action by the people they owed. Though each person was owed less than $10,000, the total was overwhelming for them. They ended up selling the house they had bought just a few years prior. But because they had a mortgage, most of the proceeds went to paying that off, and the little that was left went towards the lawsuit settlement. Even though it was their most valuable asset, I couldn't believe they had to sell their house. It turned out they sold the house intending to move back into mine. I learned this sometime after the lawsuit, when I got a phone call from an enraged Morty.
Mom! What the hell? Our house is gone. What's going on?
What do you mean?
As the for sale sign says, I sold the house and land.
It's quite obvious, isn't it? Indeed, I had decided to sell the house and land even before they faced the lawsuit. Real estate agents said that vacant houses are hard to sell, and that it was better to demolish and sell the land. Following their advice, I demolished the house and quickly sold the land due to its good location. The money went towards moving with Darren. Actually, Darren was attending a high school quite far away, and commuting from the old house was quite the journey. So we moved closer to his school for a shorter commute. When I explained this, Morty started shouting.
What? Where are you living now? We have nowhere to live since we sold our house. Tell me your address, we'll live with you.
There's no way I'll tell you.
One reason I sold the house and land was to cut ties with you. I won't tell you where we live, and I'm blocking your number, so don't contact us ever again. No. No way. That's too harsh.
Morty was stunned, and behind him, Maya's despairing scream could be heard. The ones who are truly terrible are you two.
You don't seem to be remorseful at all, but you should reflect on your actions and attitudes. The last thing I can say to you as a parent is to learn to introspect and repent. Goodbye.
I said and ended the call, setting it to block further communication. My disillusioned son and his wife managed to find an old apartment to live in, but they seemed to be leading a tough life. Afterwards, I consulted with the lawyer hired by Lean and reconsidered my relationship with Darren. Until now, I had raised him as a grandmother. But Morty and his wife's presence was negatively influencing Darren. So, I considered legally becoming his parent through adoption. If it were recognized, I wouldn't have to divide my estate equally between Darren and Morty when I pass away. It would prevent Morty from running off with everything. I decided to check with Darren.
Darren, I want to adopt you. Not just as a grandmother and grandson, but legally as mother and son. What do you think? I respect your feelings, of course.
After a moment of silence.
Yeah, I want to be your son officially.
Darren smiled shyly and said. With Darren's consent, I contacted the family court with the help of a lawyer. Given Morty's terrible behavior, the adoption was relatively easily approved. Likely influenced by Darren being 16 years old. Darren and I successfully completed the adoption process. It was a joyous moment for me, especially knowing that he chose me over his biological parents even when he is still in his adolescence. Darren, talented in inventing, is always trying new things, and I'm living a peaceful life, enjoying watching him grow. My daughter Sharon's husband Christopher suddenly said with a sly smile.
I want to take this opportunity and discuss this with you. I had a DNA test taken because I thought she didn't look like me. and it turns out she's not my daughter,"
Christopher said, so pointing at my granddaughter Tiana, who was being held by Sharon. I made an eye contact with my husband Dylan while Christopher was unable to hide his smirk. I figured as much. I was disappointed, but anger quickly overtook me.
"So you've been cheating on me behind my back? You bastard! Were you having an affair with one of the fathers who picks up their kids from daycare?"
His raised voice caught the attention of those around us. I felt truly sorry. I still wanted to believe in him.
"A woman like this is totally untrustworthy. Divorce. I want a divorce."
Sharon seemed unable to comprehend Christopher's sudden change. Tiana, sensing something was wrong, started crying, and her cries echoing around us. I couldn't believe he was this kind of person. I felt an anger towards him like I had never felt before for neglecting my daughter. Looking over at Dylan, I saw him with an angry expression, fists clenched. This was our only chance. I exchanged glances with Dylan, then took out a photo we had prepared in advance. This photo was our trump card. With hands trembling with anger, I held up the photo in front of Christopher. "My name is Violet. I'm a 55-year-old housewife. I live a commonplace life, but I cherish the certain happiness I feel and value the peaceful family life I have. My family consists of my husband Dylan, who currently works at a travel agency, my daughter Sharon, a nursery teacher, and my granddaughter Tiana. We are a family of 4. Until recently, Christopher, Sharon's husband, who's also an assistant director who works at a TV station, lived with us. When he was still in this house, I never dreamed we would end up living separately. Our current life goes back to when I met Dylan. Meeting Dylan was a story from decades ago. Back then, it was common for our marriages to be arranged by our parents. He was 5 years older, in the prime of his career at a travel agency. He had a manly and serious look about him, which left a good impression on me. Due to his job, he was knowledgeable about geography all over the world. I remember him talking excitedly about the charms of various tourist destinations over dinner. Holding a glass of beer in his hand, he said with enthusiasm, "My favorite place is definitely the pyramids of Egypt. It's what I recommend most to customers. The pyramids, made of limestone, used to shine white, reflecting the sun when they were first built." His carefree smile, like a little boy, stirred something in my heart. Seeing him like that, I wanted to sit next to him and hear more. "I would love for you to take me to your recommended places, Dylan." To that he responded with a smile. "Leave it to me." That's how we hit it off, starting a relationship with marriage in mind. Dylan was busy with work, but he always made time for me. His experience in a travel agency showed in how perfectly he planned our dates and trips. I wanted to walk through life with this man. After a few months of dating, I was convinced that we could make a married life work. "Please marry me. I want to see the pyramids with you on our honeymoon." It was an unplanned proposal. He stared at me wide-eyed for a few seconds, then broke into a broad smile. "Of course. Thank you."
"Really? I'm sorry I made you say it."
Thus, having confirmed our feelings for each other, we officially pledged our love at our wedding a few months later. True to our promise, we went to Egypt to see the pyramids on our honeymoon. That scenery will never fade in my mind, even after many years. In the midst of what could be called the pinnacle of happiness, our daughter Sharon was born. Life with a child passed surprisingly quickly, and before we knew it, Sharon had grown up and become a respectable nursery teacher. Sharon, who always loved children, seemed fulfilled, even though she was often busy with the kids at the nursery. Through her work, she started talking about wanting to get married and have her own children. She came to me for advice when she was 26.
"Mom, do you remember Nicola from my university? I talked to her about getting married, and she invited me to a party. I'm not sure if I should go or not."
Seeing my daughter seemingly exhausted from thinking about marriage and kids, I decided to give her a push. "Well, isn't this a chance? You can trust an invitation from Nicola. Why not just go and see?" Sharon looked somewhat anxious, but eventually decided to go. And so the day of the party came. Sharon left the house wearing fancier clothes than usual. Her makeup, different from her normal style, seemed to be done with extra effort. Dylan and I had dinner alone for the first time in a while. As we ate, Dylan seemed restless. "What's wrong? Wasn't the dinner good?" I asked half-jokingly, and Dylan replied awkwardly. "Of course not. I'm just a bit worried about Sharon. I hope she doesn't get deceived by some strange guy." I felt the same way. After all, I was the one who had encouraged Sharon to go.
"I guess so. But it's Sharon, she'll be fine. She has a good eye for men. After all, she takes after me in that regard. I guess you're right."
I think we both were trying to mask our anxiety with laughter. Then, a few hours later, Sharon returned. When I asked how it went, Sharon said with a smile,
"There was a great guy there. A really great guy."
And she kept repeating how he was a good person. Whether it was from the cold air of January or the excitement of finding someone, her cheeks were flushed. "What kind of person is he?" Dylan asked, and to that Sharon proudly replied,
"He's part of a TV crew. His name is Christopher. He goes on location shoots and visits all sorts of places. I went on many trips with you too, right? So, we hit it off."
Upon hearing this, Dylan frowned slightly. "A TV crew, so he's in the entertainment industry, right? I don't have a very good impression of that. How should I put it? Didn't he look a bit frivolous? But you're the one who said, men who travel to different places and see various sceneries are trustworthy. He had black hair and didn't look frivolous at all." "Well, I did say that, but..." I calmed down Dylan, who didn't seem convinced, and told Sharon, "Anyway, make sure you date him properly and take your time to find out what kind of person he is. It's late now. You have work tomorrow, right?" I urged Sharon, who seemed quite drunk, to go to bed. After that, Sharon and Christopher officially started dating. Their relationship seemed to be going well, and Sharon introduced Christopher to me and Dylan. Christopher, being in the entertainment industry, initially seemed elusive. But after talking to him, he turned out to be very personable. So when they brought up marriage, I genuinely agreed. The best thing is to respect Sharon's choice. Thus, they continued their relationship smoothly and got married 2 years after meeting. Christopher, wearing an undoubtedly expensive suit, came to greet us formally. He held a bottle of high-end wine in his hand. I was genuinely happy for Sharon's marriage. Sharon's face, brimming with happiness, made it clear she was at the peak of her joy. Thinking back, that might have been the happiest time. Christopher, looking confident, addressed Dylan.
"I've brought some wine. Let me pour you a glass."
Dylan, albeit awkwardly, accepted it. The meal continued in a good atmosphere for a while. It was when the bottom of the wine bottle Christopher brought started to show that the mood changed. "You're in the entertainment industry, right? Frankly, I still can't trust you." Dylan's words made me freeze. The room suddenly became quiet, the atmosphere tense. I didn't want to ruin this happy moment.
"Hey, why are you saying such unpleasant things all of a sudden?"
I sharply said to Dylan. Sharon then spoke up.
"That's right. What are you talking about, Dad? That's just prejudice. It's terrible that you can't trust the person I chose."
Dylan's frown did not ease even at Sharon's words. Christopher tried to maintain a smile, but he was undoubtedly upset. The evening ended with an awkward atmosphere. After Christopher left, a sober Dylan sincerely apologized to us. Indeed, Dylan's opinion was nothing but a prejudice. Sharon's smile had proved Christopher was a good match, which was evident. Gradually, seeing our daughter's happy smile, Dylan began to accept Christopher. They were supposed to have pledged eternal love at their wedding. They were supposed to be in love. Now, I regret not listening more to Dylan's concerns. As Sharon was approaching her 30s, she announced her pregnancy. Both Dylan and I were overjoyed. Dylan, like when he talks about tourist destinations, awaited the grandchild's birth with a childlike smile. And I too, got too excited for my age. You two are getting ahead of yourselves. Then, at Sharon's request, she and Christopher decided to move in with us. We thought it would be better for everyone to live here together. We were saying you guys would surely be happy living with your grandchild. That's true. You both have jobs, right? Leave the caregiving to Grandma and Grandpa. Don't worry. Their belongings had already been moved from the nearby apartment where they had been living. Everything was prepared for the whole family to live together. Tears welled up as I thought about my daughter's growth and the upcoming birth of my grandchild. As we had these conversations, Sharon's belly grew. Christopher was still busy with work. I understood his job, but I wondered if he couldn't be a bit more supportive of Sharon. As for Sharon, being on maternity leave, she spent most of her time at home. I asked about Christopher's work. Sharon, rubbing her belly, defended him.
Christopher is busy. He's always on the go. But he calls every day to say good morning and good night. We're even thinking of names for the baby together. Hoping for a beautiful girl.
Oh, we'd love to help pick a name too. Sharon smiled, savoring her happiness, as she listed a few name options. As the due date approached, Sharon decided to name the baby Tiana. The moment Tiana was born, her vibrant cry was indescribably precious. Sharon's relieved expression. Tears in Christopher's eyes. Dylan's beaming smile. And Tiana, trying her best to breathe. I was confident that our lives were solid and would continue to be so. However, the happy future I envisioned never came to be. At the height of my daughter's happiness, I was shocked to learn a disturbing truth from Dylan. He had confirmed some unbelievable behavior from Christopher. I didn't want to doubt him. He was supposed to be the perfect husband for my precious daughter. Despite my uneasy feelings, Dylan, with a serious expression, insisted.
I saw it with my own eyes. I know it's hard to believe Christopher's suspicious behavior. Violet, you might not want to know, but it's true. That man is lying. To us and to Sharon.
I had never seen Dylan so emotional in over 30 years together. From his unsettled state, I learned everything. Dylan's seriousness made me realize the gravity of the situation. But it was too much to accept all at once. Why would Christopher do such a thing? What about Sharon and Tiana? My heart pounded, wishing I hadn't heard this truth. I wanted it all to be a lie. Especially since Tiana had just been born. Since Dylan told me, a swelling rage grew inside me. I felt the greatest anger of my life. I didn't know what the right answer was, but it was for Sharon and for Tiana. Reluctantly, I decided to follow Dylan's plan. Then we quietly began our preparations, just the two of us. Meanwhile, Tiana continued to grow. A month after her birth, we decided to go out as a family. The attendees were me, Dylan, Sharon, Christopher, and Tiana, 5 in total. I heard Christopher had planned this outing, which was a great surprise. He had arranged everything, including the meal. Dylan and I carefully prepared for the day. Upon arrival, Sharon lovingly watched Tiana. After taking a family photo with Tiana at the center, I wished for these peaceful days to continue. I glanced at Christopher. He wasn't looking at Sharon or Tiana. Although smiling, Christopher's attitude and tone seemed detached, as if preoccupied with something else. Then Christopher suddenly said with a sly smile,
I want to take this opportunity and discuss this with you. I had a DNA test taken because I thought she didn't look like me. And it turns out she's not my daughter.
Christopher said, so pointing at my granddaughter Tiana, who was being held by Sharon. I made an eye contact with my husband Dylan while Christopher was unable to hide his smirk. Just as I thought. I was disappointed, but quickly anger overwhelmed me.
The test results show that Tiana is not my child.
His shout drew the attention of those around us.
So you've been cheating on me behind my back? You bastard. Were you having an affair with one of the fathers who picks up their kids from daycare?
I felt a deep sense of regret. I still wanted to believe in him.
A woman like this can't be trusted at all. Divorce. I want a divorce.
Sharon seemed unable to comprehend Christopher's sudden change. She just froze and couldn't move. Sensing something amiss, Tiana, held by Sharon, started crying. Tiana's cries echoed throughout the area. After a moment, Sharon, with a look of astonishment, confronted Christopher.
What do you mean? Why would you say that all of a sudden I haven't cheated?
Christopher answered with a smug look.
You say you haven't cheated, but can you provide any concrete evidence right now?
I can't provide that, but I really haven't.
Ah, so you're making excuses. I have irrefutable evidence here.
Saying this, Christopher showed us the DNA test results and a divorce application. The test results indicated that there was no proof of a parent-child relationship between Christopher and Tiana. Half of the divorce application was already filled out. He had prepared all this. Sharon, faced with this evidence, couldn't say anything, her face on the verge of tears. Her lips were tightly pressed, enduring the pain, and my heart ached for her. Who could have imagined she would be treated this way?
The results show that she's not my child. A cheating woman made a child with some other man, and the DNA proves it. Sign the divorce papers quickly. If you resist, I'll take you to court and demand compensation.
Then Christopher, who had retracted his smile, spoke in a low voice.
Hey, I've got a good lawyer. You can't escape, so be prepared.
It's incredible how far he could take this act. This was the man he turned out to be. I felt a rage towards him like never before for neglecting my daughter. Glancing at Dylan, I saw he was angry too. Now was the only chance. I exchanged glances with Dylan and then took out a photo we had prepared in advance. This photo was our trump card. Holding it with trembling, angry hands, I presented it in front of Christopher.
If you're going to do that, we have something to present as well. Right, Dylan? Yes, indeed.
Dylan pulled several photos from his jacket pocket. They were photos of Christopher's infidelity, obtained by hiring a private investigator. Each photo was decisive evidence, but we had prepared multiple.
It's necessary to confront him thoroughly with irrefutable evidence. How come these are here? What's this?
In each of the several photos, Christopher was clearly visible. There were pictures of him walking arm in arm with an unknown woman, entering a hotel with a woman, and kissing a woman on the street, among others. Since the day Dylan confirmed Christopher's suspicious behavior, we had been investigating his actions with a detective. The skill of a professional detective is astounding.
So, you were regularly meeting another woman, planning to switch from Sharon to her? Who's the one cheating, I wonder?
Dylan also started yelling as well.
You bastard! Trampling on Sharon's feelings.
Christopher's smile had vanished, replaced by an unmistakable panic.
How did you find out? No, wait. This is fake. You made these composite photos to slander me, you liar. Sharon's the one cheating.
His voice was low at first, as if reassuring himself, then became accusatory, threatening us. But my anger was beyond control. Dylan, as if echoing my fury, shouted.
You're the one who is lying. Are you saying all these photos are fake?
Perhaps feeling overwhelmed by Dylan, or realizing his excuses were futile, Christopher suddenly became quiet. Dylan, although sometimes seen as unapproachable, hardly ever raises his voice. I realized for the first time how intimidating he could be when he was truly angry. Dylan took a breath and began talking in a quiet manner.
My discomfort wasn't mistaken. You might not have noticed, but I heard everything from the bathroom. Those overly suspicious conversations. Things like I'll manage the separation smoothly or help me forge the DNA report. I didn't intend to listen, but such conversations are obviously strange. You've been deceiving and hurting our daughters all this time.
Dylan had accidentally overheard Christopher's phone conversation while he was in the bathroom. Dylan had been close to the door without realizing Christopher was there. And then Dylan raised his voice again.
We're going to do another DNA test. Science will prove it. The second test should yield the same results, right? You'll take responsibility for what you've said. Don't even think about running away.
Christopher's legs wobbled, his nose running, reduced to a pitiable state. Tiana, tired from crying, had fallen asleep. Was he always such a pathetic man? I remembered his sharp, robust appearance when he first came to ask for our daughter's hand in marriage. That man was nowhere to be seen now. At that moment, something snapped inside me. Sharon must have felt the same. Her eyes brimming with tears, she looked at Christopher with a mix of disgust and pity. I rubbed Sharon's back. I wanted to believe in you, if only I could. I sighed heavily, but now that the truth was revealed, Christopher could only apologize. His pride gone, his apologies seemed too late. Then, as Christopher was profusely apologizing, Sharon approached him. With tears in her eyes, she lashed out at him angrily.
Don't joke around. It's too late to apologize now. Get out of our sight. You're the worst.
Christopher's apology was cut off by the sound of a sharp slap. It felt like a satisfying sound that dispelled the terrible atmosphere. After receiving a powerful slap from Sharon, Christopher collapsed to his knees. He tried to flee but seemed unable to move, his legs giving out.
As you wish, we'll part ways. Goodbye forever.
Christopher received the stares of everyone around. Urged by Sharon, Dylan and I left the scene. Sharon didn't look back, not even once. According to the detective's investigation, Christopher's affair partner was an ex-girlfriend. The reason they broke up was apparently because he was a part-timer with low income at the time. Back then, Christopher was juggling part-time night shifts at a grocery store and stocking shelves at a supermarket. Later, Christopher joined a TV crew, and during a street interview for a TV program, he happened to meet his ex-girlfriend again. It was a wide show hosted by a celebrity known for his sharp tongue. His ex-girlfriend seemed impressed with Christopher, who had made a place for himself in the entertainment business. By this time, Sharon was already pregnant. Both wanting to rekindle their relationship, the ex-girlfriend was quite cooperative with this plan. Such a hopeless situation, I thought. Now that I knew the whole truth, my anger was replaced more with disappointment. On the way home, none of us spoke a word. If even we, as parents, were deeply hurt, Sharon's emotional wounds must be immeasurable. In the heavy silence, Dylan broke the ice.
Hey. You should just rest for now. I'll take care of all the tedious things like the compensation claim and other procedures with Violet.
Sharon just nodded silently. I also spoke to Sharon.
Your life is still ahead of you. For Tiana's sake, eat delicious food, get plenty of sleep, enjoy beautiful scenery, and just focus on resting. We'll always be here to support you.
Sharon was still struggling to come to terms with her feelings. But with Tiana there, we had to move forward. Few months passed by, but Sharon tended to stay at home. Given what had happened, it was understandable. Yet gradually, she regained her smile and declared,
If I keep mourning, Tiana's going to get mad at me. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry for worrying you so much. I'm thinking of returning to work soon.
As for the compensation, Christopher and his party ended up paying $15,000 each. It was a deserved retribution. And Christopher was dramatically dumped by his ex-girlfriend. She was furious about the large sum of money lost because of him.
That's a fitting end for such a man,
Dylan said with a face that couldn't hide his disgust. About half a year later, in a season of blue skies, Sharon successfully returned to work. Worried, I secretly visited her workplace. My concerns were unnecessary, as I saw Sharon lively and happily working surrounded by children. I told this to Dylan, and to that he proudly snorted.
I told you there was no need to worry.
Though he had hesitated to come with me till the last minute. Hearing Dylan's words, I couldn't help but laugh, feeling our happy daily life returning. Despite everything, our family had regained peaceful days. Tiana was growing up healthy. Dylan, now past 60, was still actively working. Today, I'm preparing a meal for a family dinner. After setting the table, I said to everyone,
"Let's go on a family trip again. Anywhere, as long as we're together." "Absolutely. Anywhere we go will be fun."
At that moment, Tiana made a sound as if replying. Her incomprehensible babble was enough to bring a smile to Sharon's face. We all smiled in response. "Dad and Mom, live long, okay? I want to show Tiana the wide world. Just like the old times, I hope we can travel together again. Of course, I plan to live long. Right, Dylan?" "Yes, indeed. Maybe it's time to cut back on the alcohol." Dylan went to put the beer he had prepared back in the fridge. I too thought about starting walking myself to stay healthy. With these 4 people, I felt like we could do anything. I want to continue spending my days in this house, unchanged. Because I know there is certain happiness here.
This time, give the baby to your brother. You can just have another one.
After I announced my pregnancy to my parents, my mother uttered those unbelievable words. Brother Zach and his wife Rosie, who is infertile, demanded that I give up my child for adoption to them. My parents have always prioritized Zach over everything and neglected me. The hopeful future I had envisioned upon conceiving my first child turned into despair. My name is Olivia. I've been married to my husband Walt for 3 years. Our marriage is great, and we've been talking like we want a child soon. However, I've kept some distance from my family home. The reason lies with my parents and my brother Zach. At the family home, my parents, Zach, and his wife Rosie live together. Zach was a prodigy since childhood and graduated from a prestigious university. He now secured a job at a major corporation. He is set to join and eventually take over our father's company. Our parents have adored him since he was young. In comparison, I wasn't very smart and had average looks, so I don't have many memories of being cherished by our parents. From a young age, I was always confused by the difference in treatment between Zach and me, often feeling down alone. Especially our mother, she was always with him, clearly showing he was her favorite. As for me, she mostly ignored me. When she did talk, it was usually to put me down. Perhaps influenced by our parents, Zach looked down on me too, so we never had a good sibling relationship. I felt I had no place at home and grew increasingly isolated. For those reasons, as soon as I graduated high school, I left home. My parents, seemingly uninterested in me, didn't say much when I announced my departure. In fact, they seemed almost pleased. After leaving, I got a job. And 3 years later, I married Walt, who was a classmate from high school. I was eager to build my own family and find my peace, away from the influence of my family. I only return home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. I'd rather not go, but my parents insist. They worry about appearances, and a daughter who never visits would look bad. They make a fuss if I don't go, so I endure it and visit twice a year. I went back grudgingly this Thanksgiving, but my mother was as cold as ever.
You and your husband are still so unimpressive. It ruins the festive mood.
She started with her sarcasm right away. She called us back only to say such things. If she's going to be like this, she shouldn't bother calling. I thought, while fending off her sarcasm, but her barbs continued. We're worried about you. You two live in poverty. We always think you'll come begging for money. My family home is quite wealthy. But since leaving, I've never asked for financial help and have been living off our own earnings with Walt. We manage a decent life and even celebrate their birthdays properly.
There's no way we would do that.
I immediately responded to her baseless accusation. However, she blurted out,
"But you two are still low income, aren't you?"
And then shifted her gaze to Walt beside me.
"Walt, you're still working at that detective agency, right? How long do you plan to keep doing that shady business? Don't you feel embarrassed?"
Indeed, Walt works as a detective, something she always ridicules. She sees detective work as shady and inferior to regular jobs. While Walt was explaining his job to make it understandable for her, Zach chimed in.
Mom, it's pointless to even listen to that. Detective work is shady, something nobody wants to get involved in. It's a low-level job done by people beneath us. The salary must be nothing compared to mine.
Flaunting his elitism, Zach looked down on detective work, just like her. That is something we've been hearing since we got married. Walt remained silent, but I felt angry that his job was being completely dismissed. Walt has been my confidant since our student days, so he understands what my family is like. Therefore, he always accompanies me when we have to visit my parents, not wanting to leave me alone. Even though he knows he'll be subjected to unpleasantness, I still feel terribly guilty. This visit, like others, ended up being an unpleasant experience. We resolved to live modestly together, not bothered by my family. Around that time, something wonderful happened. In our 3rd year of marriage, I finally became pregnant. I was overjoyed to be expecting our first child. Considering the way my parents always disparaged me, I felt I couldn't keep my pregnancy a secret from them. So, I visited my family home to announce it. It had been a while since I visited outside of Thanksgiving and Christmas, and my parents, Zach, and his wife Rosie were there. The response to my announcement was unexpected. Upon hearing my news, my mother suddenly raised her voice.
How dare you say such a thing in front of Zach?
I was surprised by her reaction. I hadn't expected congratulations, but this was unexpected. I was puzzled by her reference to Zach, and as I tilted my head in confusion, she revealed a shocking truth.
Zach can't have children, due to Rosie's constitution. How could you be so insensitive with your announcement?
I had no idea that they were infertile. Stunned by her unexpected words, I turned to look at the two. Zach looked uncomfortable and resigned. Meanwhile, Rosie was looking down solemnly.
You dare have a child before Zach. If it weren't for Rosie, this wouldn't have happened.
She sighed dramatically, glancing back and forth between Rosie and me. Observing that, Zach intervened. You know, Rosie feels guilty enough as it is. Don't be too hard on her, Mom. I was a bit surprised to hear he defend Rosie. From my occasional visits, I knew that his attitude towards Rosie was never that kind.
You're really kind, Zach. Rosie, if it weren't for being Zach's wife, you'd have been divorced long ago.
Hearing Zach's words, our mother glared at Rosie. Indeed, knowing them, they might have divorced Rosie immediately upon learning of her infertility. But perhaps Zach does have some affection for his wife. I pondered that as I watched he calm our mother down.
Well, I've made my announcement, so I'll be heading home.
The atmosphere had turned to blaming Rosie because of my announcement, so I decided to leave quickly. But then, my mother turned to me and said something unbelievable.
The baby you're having, give it to Zach. What?
I couldn't help but exclaim in shock at her outrageous suggestion. What does she mean, give my baby to Zach?
You can have another child since you're capable of having one. Since Rosie seems unable to. So giving that baby to Zach as an adopted child will bring peace to our family.
Peace? What is she talking about? How could they think of taking my baby for him, just because he can't have children? That's absurd and unjustifiable. When I insisted I would never agree to such a thing, my mother retorted,
Look, this is our long-awaited first grandchild. I'll let it grow around me. It's only right that we get to raise it. Zach will take over the company, so we will raise the baby.
She made such infuriating arguments, planning to take away my unborn child just to ensure a successor for our father's company. She talked about the process of adoption as if she had researched it, but I was too furious to listen. Seeing how irritated I was, Zach added something unbelievable. Well, since Rosie can't have children, it's good for her that you got pregnant at this time. At least you're finally contributing to this family. I couldn't believe it, but Zach seemed to agree with her. Even our father, who usually says nothing, nodded in agreement from behind them. It seemed the whole family was ready to claim my baby as their own. I couldn't believe how casually Zach spoke such terrible words to his own wife, acting as if nothing was wrong. Realizing that talking further was pointless, I decided to leave immediately. They only said, Make sure to give us an answer next time you come. And didn't even come out to see me off. Only Rosie, who must have been deeply hurt, silently saw me off. Even after returning home, my anger didn't subside. Far from celebrating my pregnancy, they made an unreasonable and absurd demand. Thinking about the future made me feel gloomy. They would probably keep pushing for adoption after the baby was born. Walt was also shocked when he heard the story from me after returning from work. Even he was at a loss for words. He understands my family, but the situation being beyond belief. A few days later, we had an unexpected visitor at home. What brings you here so suddenly? It's rare to see you alone. It was Rosie. She looked haggard, her skin lacked luster, and her hair was disheveled. As she looked at us, her eyes brimmed with tears. Olivia, I'm so sorry about the other day. She must be referring to when I went to announce my pregnancy. It wasn't her fault though. She seemed to feel guilty about the unreasonable demands made by my family. Then, she began to speak about something unexpected. Actually, I have something I want to talk to you about. What could it be? I invited her in to hear her out. What she revealed was shocking, and my anger surged again. Trying hard to suppress her anger, she calmly told me a significant truth. Walt had been quietly listening to our conversation, but spoke up as our talk wound down, saying, "Actually," and revealed information to me. It was as astonishing and infuriating as Rosie's confession. Although Rosie had been listening to Walt's story, her teared up again. Having been informed of this significant fact by Walt and Rosie, I made a decision. To punish my parents and Zach. I swore to myself to settle past grievances and seek revenge. 3 months later, my belly beginning to show, I visited my family home with Walt. There were my parents, Zach, and Rosie. You've decided to give the baby to Zach, right? My mother asked, without even a greeting. It seemed she could only think of my baby being adopted by Zach. I told you before, that's not going to happen. As I responded, my parents glared at me, as if they couldn't accept it. No matter what you say, we're taking that baby. Stop being so stubborn. My mother appeared infuriated by my resistance. Feeling the same way, Zach and my father just glared at me without stopping her. No matter how much you yell, I will never give the baby away. Instead, I came today to show something to you guys. Is that okay, Rosie? I said, then made eye contact with Rosie. She nodded, still looking into my eyes. Rosie intends to divorce Zach. And the reason is this. I pulled several photos from an envelope I had brought. That was my purpose for coming today.
These are...
Seeing the photos, Zach was speechless. The photos showed Zach kissing another woman and entering a hotel, undeniable evidence of his infidelity. Apparently shocked to have been photographed. He muttered just one sentence.
Who the hell took these photos?
Our parents, standing next to Zach, looked bewildered and alternated their gaze between him and me. They probably had no idea that he was having an affair. It was Walt who took these.
What?
Yes, Walt had taken the photos. Walt had been silently watching that unfold, but began to explain how he came to take the photos. As a detective, he had incidentally seen Zach walking in downtown with an unknown woman while investigating a case. Out of curiosity, he conducted his own investigation and discovered that Zach was having an affair with that woman by pretending to be single. The decisive moment was captured in those photos. Zach seemed to think he had cleverly kept his affair secret. He was dumbfounded and at a loss for words. Adultery is a valid reason for divorce. Make sure you pay Rosie a proper compensation. Amidst the tense atmosphere, Zach spoke.
I got stuck with a wife who's so incompetent. It's okay to have a little fun outside, right?
Rosie and I were speechless. Instead of apologizing, he blamed Rosie for his infidelity.
That's right, you're right. Rosie, it's because you're incompetent. To think you're acting all high and mighty about divorce.
Our mother joined in, supporting his retort. They were desperately trying to blame Rosie, probably not wanting to be at a disadvantage themselves. I guess after I left, she must have been treated coldly by this family, just like I was. Thinking about it made me feel terribly sorry for her. Therefore, I decided to confront this family today. To save myself and Rosie, who had been neglected all that time, I pushed them further into a corner by blaming Rosie.
Zach, you made fun of Walt, but the investigative skills of a professional detective are extraordinary. As soon as he started investigating, evidence kept piling up. And then, we found out something shocking about your mistress.
Saying that, I saw my parents tensing up, wondering what shocking fact would come out next.
The woman you're having an affair with seems to be the daughter of a mafia boss.
As soon as I revealed it, Zach stiffened as if frozen. He must not have known that. Immediately, my mother screamed.
What? Is that true?
Her beloved son's mistress being the daughter of a mafia boss. Upon knowing the full extent of the shocking truth, she collapsed to the ground, covering her face with both hands. My father also pressed his head with both hands, as if he had heard something terrifying.
Zach, you were pretending to be single while dating her, correct?
Right, he had hidden his marital status to have an affair with the woman.
If she finds out that she's been deceived by a married man, what do you think will happen? What will her parents do when they learn their daughter was tricked by a married man? It would be better to tell them, right?
With my threatening words, now clearly realizing the identity of the woman he had been deceiving, Zach started to panic.
No! I didn't know either. I was deceived too.
Our parents, domineering just a moment ago, were now completely confused by this unforeseen revelation. Then, Rosie began to speak in front of the flustered.
You didn't just deceive your mistress, did you?
With her words, tension returned to the room. Then, she repeated what she had told me during her visit. You are infertile, aren't you? At that moment, Zach's face showed an "oh no" expression. Our parents looked at him in shock. They had blamed Rosie for not being able to have a baby, but the cause was actually Zach himself.
Did you know, Rosie?
That was all he could manage to say. The stunned parents were visibly shaken by the harsh impact. As they struggled to find their next words, Rosie delivered the final blow.
I found it accidentally while cleaning the room.
Rosie had stumbled upon his infertility diagnosis, hidden in his desk drawer. He couldn't admit that to his doting parents, so he kept that fact a secret and blamed infertility on Rosie. Believing his words, our parents had blamed Rosie. His protective comments about Rosie when I announced my pregnancy were probably due to his guilt over the issue.
Being blamed for not being able to have a baby, I suffered every day. And the talk turned to taking Olivia's child. I was just so sad.
Rosie declared that with a calm and unchanged expression. In contrast, my parents had just learned the shocking truth and were in a panic.
To think Zach will never have a baby, that's just...
My mother was despairing at the reality of not being able to hold his child. But in the next moment, she turned her hysterical hatred towards him.
You knew it was your fault, yet you pushed all the blame onto your wife. Did you cheat with other women just because you knew you were infertile? How could my son be so low? Oh dear, why did this happen?
She vented her frustration at him. Hearing it, he finally spoke and started his pitiful explanation.
I was shocked to find out I was infertile. I felt guilty for not giving you two a grandchild. When I found out Olivia was pregnant with a boy, it just seemed convenient.
It was a story that made me feel utterly contemptuous. Shaking off my anger, I delivered the final blow to the three.
Your selfish actions hurt Rosie and me. Besides, you have an affair with such a dangerous person. Zach, Mom, and Dad, you all better brace yourselves for what's coming. You guys have hurt so many people, now you'll get what you deserve.
Hearing my words, they started apologizing to us, their earlier bravado gone. Where did the momentum go when you asked me to give up my son? I looked at the three of them with disdain, like looking at trash. Beside me, Rosie said nothing and just stared ahead. Her silence spoke volumes about the depth of her sorrow. Zach and my parents were in for tough times ahead. The father of Zach's mistress learned about the affair, and the three of them were summoned and had to apologize repeatedly. Although they managed to break off the affair, Zach was forced to pay a hefty compensation because he had deceived the woman. The amount was staggering, and they learned the hard way the dangers of entanglement with such people. Because of that, My family home soon fell into disarray. My father was forced to resign as company president due to the public scandal. My mother became isolated, seen with disdain by the neighbors, and withdrew into herself. The relationship between my parents became hostile, constantly arguing over Zach. Zach was forced to leave his job after the scandal leaked to his company. As if to add insult to injury, his divorce with Rosie was finalized. Losing his job and having to pay compensation to Rosie, Zach was trapped in a life of relentless work. Around the time Rosie successfully left the family home, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Both the baby and I were in good health, and I savored the joy of welcoming a new life. The happy days for our family of 3 began. Then, Walt and I decided to cut all ties with my family. I had been torn about severing ties with such parents and brother, but that incident made me realize it was best for my son. Even without them, I have an irreplaceable family now. I've decided to cherish only my precious family from now on.